and you can start us all off.
Didn't know I.
Well, in that case, what I'll do is I'll start the meeting going. Do apologise for all the technical hitches we've had tonight. I don't know why that's happened. I'll just say welcome wherever you are in the world, whether it's morning, evening or night. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight. Just a couple of little housekeeping things about the show. As I said earlier on, I am going to be supposed to be hosting this, but it's not seeming to work very well. The meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want your image to be on that record, switch your video off. It would be appreciated if everybody stays muted, with the exception of myself and Tim. During the course of the evening, if you do want to ask questions, then by all means do so, but can you do so by means of the chat system? It's a bit like sending a text. All right, and thank you very much to Michael's Galaxy tab for saying got it, and Rick Anstis. So I'm able to read the text, no problem, although Tim can't because he's going to be showing the Peacehaven PowerPoint presentation. So before we start, I do have a few questions for Tim. And first one is from an Alan Kleckner. What's the purpose of the netting or the mesh that appears at the side of part of the garden section?
I'll make a note of this, Tony, and answer that as we go along.
Right. The next question is from a Michael Holland. There's two questions here. Does the electrical interlocking prevent the lever from physically being pulled against a conflicting movement? Or is only the point or signal prevented from the answering the command, therefore possibly confusing the operator?
Yep, that's fine. I'll answer that as we go along.
If the former, how is it achieved?
Yep, that's okay. I've got that. Yeah.
Right. And the other question from him is he notices that the indoor signals appear to be operated by a solenoid or similar. Given that the sudden action that one experiences with the solenoids, does this damage the signals?
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff.
And there is a further question that's come in this evening from a Tim Randall. KD couplers, which types were used and what techniques do you use for retrofitting them?
Right.
So that's the questions that have come in via emails to myself and Jackie. I'll let you take it from there then, Tim, if that's all right. And I shall just bring questions in as they come up.
Thank you, Tony. I hope everybody can hear me. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk to you this evening about Peacehaven. Peacehaven is a railway, a branch line in the south of England. It branches off the main line between Newhaven and Lewes at a place called South East and Rodmell, and it goes across the River Ouse and then down through Telscombe and finally ends up at Peacehaven, which is the terminus. So this is the agenda for this evening. I'll talk about the idea of the Peacehaven Railway, talk about the town of Peacehaven, something about its history, and then the Peacehaven branch, and then I'll describe Peacehaven station. We'll have a tour of the line, and I'll discuss the trains and describe them as we go through the evening. Questions, as Tony has said, as we go along, please put your questions into the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go and hope to answer them. And those that Tony's already read out, I'll try and cover those during the session. A couple of words about myself. I'm quite new to railway modelling in any serious way. As a schoolboy, I had some Hornby 003 rail, and I actually must have caught the Gauge O infection at about that time because I built a Gauge O wagon and a yard of track. A cousin of mine took me to Northampton. We visited Bassett Loke offices, house, a shop, and I expect that's where the material came from for those two things. The yard of track has long since disappeared, but the wagon has been rescued from the loft, and I can tell you is now running after a gap of 60 years on the Peacehaven Railway. So the idea of Peacehaven, I found myself with all the ingredients ready to build a garden railway, namely a garage, a brand new garage, just built, a garden of suitable dimensions, some spare time, and a very supportive wife. And so the project was able to go ahead. I wanted to build a line based in the south of England. My railway interests have always been on the southern, very much an EMU railway. And I hit on the idea of Peacehaven. I like the name, and it certainly fits the period and the location I wanted to set the model. So the idea was born from the name mainly, and the fact it's in the south of England. The town of Peacehaven is on the south coast, between Brighton and Newhaven. It was founded in about 1917 by Charles Neville. He was an entrepreneur, and he bought land in the area and sold off plots of land cheaply to retiring First World War service personnel, so they would have a pleasant place to live, fresh air and countryside, and relax in peace after the terrible times they'd had during the First World War. He publicised the scheme by having a competition in a newspaper to name the town. It was originally named New Anzac-on-Sea and subsequently named Peacehaven in these competitions. Although it was publicised that the competition was won by a Mrs. Radcliffe from Leicestershire, it is now thought that Charles Neville actually chose the names himself. Peacehaven's notable for a couple of things. One is it's the place where the Greenwich Meridian crosses the south coast of England, and there's a Meridian Memorial to recognise the fact. As for famous people, Gracie Fields once lived there, and the house which she occupied was subsequently converted into a children's home. So the Peacehaven branch, although in my imagination it was built by the Southern Railway to exploit a growing seaside town, it is of course entirely fictitious. And I planned the scheme to operate initially between two stations, Peacehaven Terminus, which is located in the garage. The line runs down the garden to the village of Telscombe and initially terminated at Telscombe. And this phase of the development took a couple of years to build. I then always envisaged an extension to a further station, a place called Rodmell, and I expected this would take a further 3 years. But of course, along came COVID and we had the lockdown. I was able to progress the thing in less than a year. So we crossed the River Ouse, we got into Rodmell, and Rodmell is location of the unhidden storage sidings. These represent the wider railway. So when the trains leave Peacehaven to go to London Bridge or Victoria or Lewes or Brighton or Red Hill, then they all terminate at Rodmell in the unhidden storage, which is the other. It represents the wider railway. Here is the construction beginning. And for the interior layout, I chose Markway Track. I must say that one of the first things that was suggested to me by my work friend, Steve Hother, was I joined the Gaugeau Guild, which I did, and I've never regretted. It's been a hugely useful thing to have done. It put me in touch with many knowledgeable and extremely pleasant people. I was able to get to the Gaugeau shows and start looking at other people's railways and get some knowledge about how to start building. And of course, the wonderful Gazette was in my hands, and I came away from the exhibitions with armfuls of back numbers of Gazettes, which formed a very positive source of bedtime reading for quite some period. And many of the ideas I've adopted have come out of articles in the Gazette. So Markway Track, the garage where the terminus is located is used for various things, one of which is to store a car, another is as a workshop. It's also the location of the ping pong table. So the railway doesn't dominate in this area. And in fact, I chose to make the railway on boards which would fold up. If you look along the left-hand edge of the board, you can see a hinge line. And the baseboard in the garage is two sections, 8 feet long by 21 inches wide, end to end. So a 16-foot terminus. And this is the shot showing the beginning of the railway being put down in the garage. I just want to comment on the pillar which you can see halfway along on the left-hand side, which of course supports the garage wall. This proved to be a bit of a problem, which I'll discuss again a bit later on. Here's the ballast laying stage. I used aquarium grit for ballast. and you can see here, even though there's no scenery or anything else, there's an EMU heading off for London Bridge, head code 77, and the signals are already in. I always intended to have an operational railway with working signals, interlocked, block working, so that the line could be operated as close as possible to prototype practice. The signals on the inside section, the semaphore signals, in fact, throughout the line, are all scratch built. I used a second-hand bullhead rail for the posts in exactly the same way as the Southern Railway did. When the original wooden signal post rotted away, they employed the economical technique of using old running rails to form the posts, and I used the same technique myself. I bought the signal arms as an etch from the Guild Executor Trustee stall, and apart from that, everything's made from bits and pieces. This is a more recent view of the Peacehaven terminus, looking towards the buffer stops. In other words, looking south, you can see the sea in the background. It's a two-platform terminus with a bay platform on the right-hand side and another platform with a run-round loop so that loco haul trains can be run round. There's a small marshalling yard, only two sidings on the left-hand side, and I deliberately put these at a lower level than the main layout so that it would improve the view of the station itself.
Tim, can I come in at that point?
You may.
Is that the bit that looks like a hump shunt on the video, or is that somewhere else on the layout?
No, that's the location of it. Having built the goods yard at a lower level, I then discovered the wagons would run quite nicely down into it. And by incorporating an uncoupler at the appropriate point, it enables fly shunting to take place, which is an added bonus, but wasn't part of the original plan. I need to comment on the scenery at the background. This was painted for me by a professional artist, also a great Gaujo modeler, Eric Bottomley. And he very kindly painted it in the style of the landscape in the Peacehaven South Coast area. And it was he who pointed out the pillar was going to be a problem from a scenic point of view. And so I had to invent the station hotel, which you can just see on the right-hand side of this picture, overlooking the station. This is looking north out of the station through the bridge which leads to the main line going up the garden. It looks as though it's double track, but in fact it isn't. It's a single line branch, and the running line is the left-hand line of the two. The right-hand line is a head shunt, which just goes a short distance to enable movements in and out of the yard, which you can see the junction for the yard on the extreme right. Again, the signals are in situ here. And I also incorporated a level crossing, a feature of many, many southern stations, having a level crossing at the end of the platform. And I wanted to put that in. Again, you can see the scenery. So when I started making buildings, I was completely inexperienced. Of course, I made many mistakes, and I'm happy to discuss those. I made the first couple of buildings, which were the station and the goods shed, out of 3mm MDF. It was possible to get it from my local DIY stockist. The station building itself is based loosely on West Grinstead. It's a matchboarded fascia, and the matchboarding is made from coffee stirrers. Our family are great collectors of coffee stirrers, and they're used widely in various applications across the railway. If you look at the retaining wall in the immediate foreground, the slabs on the top of the wall are made from coffee stirrers. Another feature of this particular view is the conductor rails, which are now in situ on part of the layout. It's a piece of unfinished work, but they're gradually being extended throughout the line. This is a view at the far end of the station. By the time this house was built, Seaview House, the supply of 3mm MDF had dried up, and I ended up using plywood, which was not quite as good, I found. But there it is. You can see the goods yard at a lower level, and in fact there's a low bridge which enables a bit of a scenic feature at the very far end of the layout. And the plate layers cabin hides the point motor for that set of points at the end of the platform. The merchandise coming into a place like Peacehaven is general goods for wholesale and retail distribution, and of course domestic coal. and the coal lorry is scratch built. The coal merchant, Manley is a family name from our past, and in fact the Manleys did in fact have a coal business on the south coast, so it's really history coming back to life. In fact, the whole railway is nostalgia and history brought to life. I decided on a row of shops. The 3-story shop is a kit, which was a laser cut kit of some sort. The remaining buildings are all made out of 2mm MDF, and having discovered 2mm MDF, I've decided I prefer it as a means of constructing buildings. It's very workable, easy to cut, easy to shape, glues together quite nicely. And we have a row of shops which starts with a fish and chip shop on the left, a general store of groceries, a shoe shop, a pub, a model railway shop, which was suggested by one of the people who comes to help operate the line, post office, and 2 cottages, one of which is derelict and for sale. Now we can just go into 1 or 2 of the features of the railway. I had to be fairly economical with purchases, and both of these locos were bought from executor and trustee at Gay-Joe Guild exhibitions. The E4 tank loco, 062 tank, came from that show, and needed a bit of modification to get it to run properly. I found with quite a few of the second-hand purchases, some adaptation is needed sometimes. In this case, the truck at the bunker end of the loco tended to derail when running bunker first, and so I redid the mounting of the pony wheels on that engine. And I also increased the amount of pickups. I found that to get good running, as many pickups as possible should be fitted, so I've done so. The loco in the foreground is another executor and trustee purchase, very cheap I have to say. It started life as a Midland 4F. I'm sure many of you will recognise that. And I noticed the likeness with the Maunsell Q class, so by adding a steam reverser and changing the cab windows, it made it look a passing resemblance to a Q. Again, fitted extra pickups on the 3rd pair of wheels and on the tender. My favourite engine, probably the Bullied Q1, and one of the major errors I made at the beginning of my modelling experience was to buy a nickel silver kit of a Bullied Q1. I've got as far as opening the box, looking at the bits, reading the instructions and putting it all back in the box again. And I've done that 3 or 4 times and haven't had the confidence to start it. I've now found a modeller who is prepared to build it for me, and it may eventually appear, although I'll probably offer it to the modeller as a gift, because he's going to put quite a lot of hours into building it. In the meantime, I discovered another kit for a Bullied Q1 from a chap called Michael Hughes. It's got a resin boiler, which makes it a very straightforward assembly. White metal cab, tender, buffer beam, and valve covers and so on. And I was able to get some BFB wheels from Slater's and put that together myself. I found although I was inexperienced, I found that soldering white metal was not too intimidating. So I managed to put that loco together all right. And I numbered it 33006 for the simple reason I once worked on that particular loco when it was in operation on the Southern. Of course, the Southern Electric is full of EMUs, and I've got 5 at the moment, I think. These 2 were both bought second hand. The 2 Hal on the right hand side was a bring and buy at a Gay-Joe Guild show. Again, it needed some modification, extra detail added, and in fact, to get it to work, I had to improve the electrics on it. But it's quite a useful member of the fleet. It multiples with the 2 Knoll on the left, which I bought through a colleague who also models in Gay-Joe. It came as a shell, so it needed finishing, painting, and fitting with bogies and the motor and all the rest of it. And that's another and useful EMU, and you will have probably seen that running. Anybody who's looked at the video can see that unit in operation. 2 more EMUs. The one on the left is a 4-car SEP corridor EP, and it was my first attempt at building a train. I built it by chopping up some Lima coaches. The Lima brake compartment coach has quite a long brake section, luggage section. And in fact, by chopping it up, it was enough to make two motor car bodies for the EMU. And the other Lima coaches, two intermediate coaches on a 4-separ compartment stock. And so the Lima coaches needed very little alteration, apart from removing the buffers, which are not fitted on the intermediate EMUs, and painting in the appropriate livery. Motor cars needed a cab put on them, of course, vegetable end jumpers, and so on. The motor luggage van is more recent, also built out of Lima coaches, in this case 2 brake carts, cut in half, joined back to back. The prototype motor luggage vans were extremely versatile vehicles. They could operate on the conductor rail at 750 volts, but they also had battery power, so they were really early hybrids. They could go into marshalling yards away from the conductor rail to do shunting on battery power. They were fitted with vacuum as well as air brakes, and they were designed to hold a tail load of up to 100 tons. So at night they could be used on parcel trains,
Tim, we seem to have lost you. I don't know whether you can hear.
Coupled onto the steps and used on things like the New Haven boat service. I don't know where you lost me from. Did you hear that bit?
Yeah, your image is locked up, but so if you want to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Stop sharing and start again, Tony. Will that work?
Yes, give it a go.
Okay, we'll go back in again. Can you see that?
We can now, yes. Thank you very much, Tim.
Did you hear the description of the motor luggage van?
We did, yes.
Okay, we'll move on and see how we get on.
Thank you.
One of my attempts at scratch building was this Coco electric loco. It wasn't too difficult to build because it's slab-sided, so it didn't need any advanced modelling skills. It's made out of 1.5mm aluminium for the structure, which includes the ends, the floor, and the bulkheads and the cab fronts. And the construction is bolted, so I use 2mm bolts and nuts to brackets to bolt it all together. The bogies come from PR Model Supplies. They supply bogies for such vehicles as the Coco Class 50 and 37, and they're readily adaptable to different wheelbases, so I could set the wheelbase to the correct wheelbase for the SR Loco, and then fit the bogie outer frames, which are plastic with the fittings. The fittings come from Laurie Griffin, and of course it's no good going to Laurie and saying, can I have some fittings for a Coco electric? Because he doesn't have those, but he has axle boxes which are the correct type, and they come from LNER, and he has springs which are the correct type, and they come from his coaching stock range. And the sandboxes are Great Western, and they all look pretty good on this particular loco. I can talk about the KD couplers at this point. Someone said what sort, and I'm struggling to remember the part number, but I think it's 746. It's the center one with the long shank, center height one, and I've adopted them as standard because I wanted to have the railway as operational as possible without too much hand operation. I spent a lot of time at shows studying other people's railways and concluded that of the automatic couplers I could see in use, the KD was probably the most robust and operationally successful. I followed the 3 standard rules when developing a new hobby. I'm sure everybody's heard of them, which are A, study your subject, B, think about it, and C, set your standards. So I did a lot of thinking, particularly on couplers, because I needed to choose a type that was going to be successful in this type of operation. I have a lot of wagons which came second-hand with 3-link couplings, and it seemed a pity to change them. So the wagons are a mixture of 3-link and KD, and some of the wagons have got KD on one end and 3-link on the other, so they can be coupled together in short rakes and then operated automatically to whatever extent you want. If someone's prepared to fiddle with 3-link couplings, then you can have a whole train of them, but it slows down the operation a bit. As for mounting the KDs, they're different in every application. And in the majority of cases, I needed to fit a block of the correct height underneath the vehicle floor. I use the KD standard fitting height, so they work on the uncouplers. I hope that answers that question about the couplers. Here's a view of the station throat. The semi-fast is arriving at Peacehaven from London Bridge. It's head code 77. As you can see, it's running into the platform. And bearing in mind the whole railway is fictitious, it's operated to as close southern practice as possible.
Can I ask at this point, do those gates actually operate?
The gates do operate, yes. And again, if anybody's seen the video, they can be seen operating in the video. They're worked by a geared motor and bells and cranks, and they're quite successful. I can show you later, if there's time, a photograph of the operating mechanism.
Well, thank you.
Someone asked about the interlocking. I'll cover that in a minute. So one of the most enjoyable features about having this railway, or any railway come to that, is getting people together and having operating sessions, and we call them running days. The line can be worked by one person, but it can be worked by up to 8 people. So if I'm running the line by myself, it can be done, but a good deal of walking is involved end to end. It's possible to do that. With 2 people, the intermediate signal box can be switched out, and the trains can be run from Peacehaven to Rodmell with 1 operator at each end. If there's as many as 8 people, then we can have 4 drivers, 3 signalmen. And in this particular picture, we've got a signalman and a driver. The guy in the middle of the picture is actually the signalman from Telscombe who's come in for a cup of tea. But that's one of the running days, and it's great fun doing it. The signalling is by block instruments. You can see one of them in the background behind the signalman's head, and we have an authentic train register to record the train movement, so we know when we've run, where they've gone, and what trains have been run. And of course, we have a range of timetables, one of which you can see stuck just above the desk. And I suppose we're up to about our 8th or 9th timetable now for different types of operation. One of the signalmen was so interested in the motor luggage van and its versatility that he wrote a timetable specially for it. So it comes off a parcels train and goes onto an EMU and then works as a light car and so on. So before I go outside, I just have a quick mention about the folded baseboards. The 2 8-foot boards fold up against the wall when they're not in use, and this has some advantages and some disadvantages. The disadvantages are, first of all, you need to take everything removable off the board before you fold it up. So you need to take all the trains off. That can be a disadvantage, but you might say it's an advantage because it ends up, you end up tidying everything off the layout before you put it to bed. Another disadvantage is that the fact that it folds against the wall means items on the baseboard can only be of a certain height, namely 14'6" in real money. So any signal that's over 14'6" or buildings that are higher than that need to be removable or foldable. And notably, the down home signal at Peacehaven is well over 14'6", and in fact it's arranged so that it automatically folds down, so we don't have any disastrous accidents of it being brushed against the wall. The advantages of folding baseboards: one, it gives you more space in the garage, and a minor advantage is that the dust falls off the layout instead of onto the layout. I sometimes see layouts that are hardly ever used and they're covered in a thick layer of dust. Well, I haven't had any dust problems because when you fold the boards up, the dust falls off. The major advantage is that when you're doing electrical work, it's at eye level. So you can stand in front of the layout or sit on a stool, and there's no upside down soldering needed. It's all in front of you. And I found that to be quite a useful feature. You can just see the level crossing mechanism at the right hand side of that picture, but I've got a better picture of it which I can show you later on. So this is a comparison of indoor construction and outdoor construction. Bear in mind, I was starting from the beginning, so I had a blank sheet of paper really to put things on. And I chose baseboards indoors, 3x1 timber with a 9mm ply top. And the track indoors is Markway, and I chose it mainly for appearance. I was a little disappointed when I got the Markway because I found the points and crossings had black sleepers and the flexi track had brown sleepers. It didn't matter in the end because the whole thing got sprayed black, but I was a bit surprised about that. The track on the indoor section is fixed down with small screws, and it is ballasted, as I said, with aquarium grit. This was applied with PVA glue, which I was shocked to find took a couple of days to set. So the board had to be left unfolded while that happened. And the points inside are Markway. The signals are a semaphore inside, and they're the scratch-built ones, which I showed you. And the signal operation, as someone correctly pointed out, is by solenoids, actually using 00 scale Pico point motors, and they're mounted on a bracket, so they're vertical. The operating rod goes through the baseboard to the balance arm, and then to the signal arm itself. Yes, they are sudden in operation, but the signals are pretty robust and they don't suffer. It is important to get the ratio of the throw and the stroke of each of the components, and then they work pretty well. Point operation on the indoor section is by cobalt point motors, which come from DCC Concepts, and they're very handy because they have lots of auxiliary contacts. The indoor lever frame is also cobalt point levers, and again they have lots of auxiliary contacts, and that's helpful for arranging the interlocking. And to answer the question on interlocking, no, the levers on the lever frame are not physically locked, but if you operate a lever when it's not free to move, then the operation doesn't take place. So you can't clear a signal with the gates in the wrong position or with the point set wrongly, and it means the signalmen do have to be a bit careful. It's not too confusing, because if the signaling is done as per prototype practice, then the signaler will operate the item, check that it's responded before making the next move. So that works quite well. Outdoors, a completely different method of construction. Again, this was gleaned from articles in the A.H.O. Guild Gazette. So it's 2-inch thick boarding, either 6 or 9 inches wide, with a roofing felt top. The track outdoors is C&L, and I obtained a large quantity of C&L track second-hand, and it's fixed down with glue. That's because I was anxious not to put any holes through the top surface of the outdoor formation, so as to make it reasonably weatherproof. There's no ballast outside. The points outside, there's only 3 of them, are Pico, 2 of them new, 1 of them second-hand from a bring and buy. The signals are a mixture of colour light and semaphore, and the outdoor semaphore signals are operated by Fulgurex point motors, as are the points, and they seem to survive the point motors quite well in all weathers. This is the construction of the outdoor part underway. The top board, 2 inches thick, is married up to a T-piece underneath, which gives it added strength. And the stanchions in the ground are about 10 feet apart. So lots of bitumen and roofing felt, hopefully, to give a degree of weather protection. Some of it's now been in service 5 years and seems to be okay at the moment. This is a 4-car MU
Tim, we seem to have
climbing the
lost you
grade.
again. I
The
don't know
terms
whether
of
you
set
can
climb.
hear me.
I can hear you clearly, Tony. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back again.
I think my internet is coming in and out a bit.
Yeah.
After leaving Peacehaven, the line climbs at a 1 in 100 gradient for the first 40 feet, and this is the forcep on the gradient. Once we get to Telscombe, we come to the village. In this picture, the village is just a baseboard. It hasn't been built yet, but the track is in place, the conductor rail's in place. This is one of the colour light signals, and the train is just pulling into the loop, which is the right-hand line. And here's another view of Telscombe village. St Lawrence's church is based on the real church at Telscombe. It has by now been fitted with a stone face, but at this stage it was an early part of the construction. And the cottage is also a real cottage in Telscombe. In fact, I didn't have room for the whole cottage, so I had to build half of it. to get it into the space. And there's the 2-knoll EMU coming into the curve. So this is the Telscom control panel, and this is another view taken on one of our running days. This is a signalman and a trainee signalman in operation. The panel is removable. It goes indoors when the line is not in use, and it comprises a mimic panel to operate the signals and points. And the interlocking in this panel is by relays. Those of you who are observant will notice the teacup on the top of the fence post, which was a bit dangerous looking back on it. I don't remember seeing it there at the time. Plenty of good raspberries. The garden is used for flowers and fruit as well as railways. This is Telscombe Station. The buildings are very rudimentary. The station building itself is a block of wood, and the roof is a door threshold cut off. And the building on the right is a small cabin which houses the relay for the colour light signal, which is at the end of the platform. There's one platform in the passing loop. You can see a good strain in the passing loop. And this is the E4 tank taking one of the cross-country trains up country. I ended up with a very nice set of LMS livery, maroon lined out coaching stock. So I had to invent a Saturdays only Peacehaven to Birkenhead train, which is worked as far as Redhill with the E4 tank. I hope you heard all that. We do have visiting locos from time to time, and this is a Western King. As we all know, they were out of gauge for quite a few places on the Southern, so we had to run the King through the loop at Telscombe because it was too wide to go through the platform line without damaging its cylinders. And this is a driver in action and a signalman at Telscombe on a running day. Here's another view of Telscombe, the far end of the station. The train in the platform is the stopping train to Brighton, and it's on the up direction, and the down train is a non-stop coming through the loop line to pass. There's a small goods shed at Telscombe. It just provides an excuse for some shunting, and another very simple building made out of offcuts of wood and covered with Slater's brickwork. After Telscombe, there's a concrete viaduct. This was a thing that took quite a bit of time to build, which was hugely helped by lockdown. So the concrete viaduct is on a curve, and then it takes us to the River Ouse, which is crossed by a girder bridge. The River Ouse is otherwise known as the Garden Path. And on the final approach to Rodmell, there's another curve as the line turns round into the storage sidings. This EMU is a 4-pull. These units only had a fairly short life on the Southern. The Pullman cars came out of the Brighton sets when the motor cars were life expired, and they were put into Portsmouth sets for a short period and operated to places on the south coast, providing Pullman dining. In my imagination, the Peacehaven commuters thought that they were hard done by compared with the Brighton trains 10 miles along the coast. They wanted a Pullman service of their own, so this works the 707 from Peacehaven up to London Bridge in the morning, getting into London Bridge about 8:40. So that's their commuter train, and they can have a Pullman breakfast on the way. Well, it's worth just mentioning the construction of that unit, which I think is going to be described in the next Gazette. The 4 coaches all come from different sources. The Pullman car was a shell, which I bought second-hand from another enthusiast, nicely finished, but it needed interior and it needed bogies, and it's now fitted with working table lamps. The motor car nearest the camera is another kit from Michael Hughes, which is my first attempt at a brass vehicle, and that's worked out quite nicely. The third vehicle along I scratch built is the kitchen dining car, and I scratch built it out of aluminium in a similar way to my electric loco. And the very far vehicle, which is the other motor car, was a gift from another enthusiast, which came as a shell and needed a motor fitted and motor bogies and interior and front end and vegetable and so on. So the unit is a real hybrid in terms of where it's come from. These are the unhidden storage sidings at Rodmell. So there are 3 lines on a sector plate, and the trains can terminate here. The locos uncouple at the far end of the line, And there are two short spur lines, one on each side of the running line, which can be used to store brake vans and locos between jobs. The signalling is very simple here. There's only one signal, which is the section signal going towards Telscombe. There is obviously a block instrument to work the trains, and that's where all the turning around is done. Here's another running day picture with the operators working, a driver and a signalman.
There's a gentleman asked where you sourced your pots for the conductor rails.
Oh, that's easy. They're number 2 round-headed brass screws. On the indoor section, they're screwed into the formation, and the conductor rail is soldered straight on the top of them. On the outdoor section, they were too long because, as I said, I didn't want to pierce the surface of the roofing felt. So I had to shorten the screws so they only go into the sleeper and not into the roofing felt. But the same principle applies. Screw them in, line the slot up in the direction I want the conductor rail to go, and then solder the conductor rail on. The conductor rail, I tried to purchase genuine conductor rail, and went round all the stands at one of the guild shows. And in the end, one of the salespeople said to me, we suggest code 100 flat bottom rail upside down. So that's what I've used. And of course, because it's upside down, it fits into the slot in the screw and then can be soldered on.
Thank you.
Very crude, but quite effective.
Peter Broomhead who asked that. Thank you very much.
This is a view from the buffer stops end at the hidden storage. And finally, a review of the rolling stock. These are more or less in the order I acquired them. The Class 33 Loco diesel electric was a gift from another modeler who wanted to get me started off. Very generous. It needed a few minor mods and again extra pickups to make sure it ran smoothly. But that's been a successful Loco to run. The Class 08 is ready to run, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and it's a very good runner indeed. The E4 tank was from the executor and trustee, as was the Maunsell Q, which started life as an LMS 4F. Well, the Bulliard Q1, as I mentioned, was a resin kit, which I built my first Loco kit really. And the SR Booster Electric Coco was my scratch build. I also purchased a Stroudley Terrier A1X, and that's ready to run. And again, very popular models. I bought one with no numbers on it, so I could give it the number I wanted. On the EMU side, the forcep was the one I built first of all out of the Lima coaches. The 2 Hal and the 2 Knoll were both second-hand, and the 4-car Pullman again was made up from bits and pieces as I described. I built the motor luggage van. I'm currently building another 2 Hal. The post-war 2 Hals were all steel vehicles and got the nickname of Tin Hal. So I'm building one of those, and that's a kit which I bought second-hand, and it's a Westdale kit. Coaching stock, well, there's the Mark 1 coaches, which are Lima in maroon. I bought a set of Bulliard coaches, and these were at an auction. I don't often buy things at auctions, and I put in what I thought was a pretty low bid and was shocked to find I'd got the item, so that arrived through the post. I bought some second-hand Lima Mark 1s in green, and these had been widened. I know it's Lima coaches are widely criticised for being not quite to scale. These ones have been widened, so they look a bit more realistic. And the assorted wagons and brake vans come from all sorts of sources. A few of them I've built from kits. Most of them are second-hand. Many of them are from executor and trustee. When executor and trustee was running, it was selling off end-of-line runs of 3 or 4 wagons at knockdown prices. Sometimes only usable as spare parts, but I've got lots of wagons from that source. If I bought a wagon with no couplings or the wrong sort of couplings, then I fitted KD to them. If I bought a wagon which was fitted with 3-link couplings which were working well, then I've tended to leave the 3-link couplings on. But all the brake vans have got KD, all the locos have got KD, and all the EMUs and coaches have got KD. So it's automatic coupling apart from the small brakes of wagons. You may be puzzled to see a Britannia. This was another visiting Loco that came for a running day. And of course, the duty line controller decided to stick it on a freight job and tender first at that. So I'm happy to take questions. I'll try and answer the question about the netting. I think it refers to the green material, which you can see in the top left-hand corner of this picture. This is in fact plastic sheet, which is used to cover the railway when it's not in use. So it's secured at the back of the formation, double folded with a length of water pipe in the edge, so it rolls off into position. When it's rolled up to make the line operational, then it drops into hooks at the back of the layout. So that's what that is. I think that's the answer to that question. I think I answered about the KD couplers. If anybody's got any other...
The other question was about the indoor signals appear to be solenoid operation.
Yes.
Does that have any operational problems for you?
No, they haven't been any operational problems. They are solenoid operated. They do clunk, but they've not created any problems. The signals themselves are quite robust, and the lever ratios are chosen to make the arm move at the correct angle. So they've been okay. That hasn't created any operational problems.
Mm-hmm. Your outdoor colour light signals, did you make those or?
Well, the colour light signals on the outdoor section are kits, and they come from, I've had to write this down, Rootmex, which is run by John Neville in Stirling.
Mm-hmm.
I think he may have changed the name of the company since then, but they've been absolutely superb, and he supplies them with the route indicator feathers as well. He does 2, 3 and 4 aspect. I've got 2 aspect and 3 aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I've arranged them so that with using relay technology, latest thing in sliced bread, they're arranged so that when the signal clears, the previous signal steps up from yellow to green. So they're reasonably authentic.
Very good.
Could I just ask who that signal company was, please?
They're called Rootmex, Routemex. It's run by a chap called John Neville.
Thank you.
And he's in Stirling in Scotland. And I have to say he's extremely helpful. I purchased a colour light ground signal from him for use at Telscombe, and I needed it wired slightly differently, which he was only too happy to do. So it was very useful.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Right. You said that the level crossing was operated by a motor underneath.
I'll try and show you it. I'll need to stop sharing and go and find it. Just bear with me a minute.
Of course. In the meantime, while you're looking for that, the head code lights on your EMUs, how are they operated?
Okay, right. Let's do the level crossing first.
Okay, yes.
I've managed to find it. I thought I'd found it. Here it is. Right, now if I go back to that and share again, that should come up. So that's the level crossing mechanism. Oh.
Yes, it was.
It was. Let's get it back.
Well, Roger Hill's just had to say he's had to go because he's got family member arrived. And apparently Calgarin do a 7mm scale conductor rail.
Right, so there we are. That's the level crossing mechanism. It's a geared motor. There are 2 aluminium plates set 1 inch apart with spacers between them. And some of the gearing is between the plates. The motor is on the left there. And the 4 gates are geared together with the yellow wheels. And they all go round together. There's 2 micro switches, one to detect the quarter turn and one to detect 180 degrees. So it stops in either the open or closed position.
Very clever.
Someone made a comment about conductor rail.
Yes, so somebody's mentioned that Calgarin do a 7mm scale conductor rail for the LSWR and SR, BR and LT.
I imagine it would be more authentic than what I've used. However, my modelling accuracy is not all that good. I mainly want to have the railway operating properly. As long as it looks half decent, then I'm happy.
Exactly.
And it was a Gay Joe Guild sales stall that suggested upside down code 100 flat bottom.
Well, I'm no expert, but it looks appropriate to me.
The other thing is on the outdoor section, of course, it never gets clean, so it eventually acquires conductor rail sort of appearance.
Uh-huh. I take it it's non-operational, the conductor rail.
That is correct. It is non-operational. People have suggested it could be made operational, but I think I've got enough fiddling to do without that.
Could I ask a question, please? Good evening, Tim.
Good evening, Martin.
Lovely railway. Very impressed by it. What would you like to add to it in rolling stock terms? And there is an ulterior motive to my question.
Okay. Well, I've got a few personal favourites which I haven't managed to acquire yet. The EMU fleet is definitely going to increase as time goes on, but of course I'm now at the stage where I've got more trains than can be run at any one time. So when we have an operating session, we have to pick our stock. But it's definitely a 4-sub EMU, which would go well with the other southern stock. Loco-wise, I quite like the idea of a 700 class black motor 060 goods engine. People tell me they didn't actually operate in that part of the southern, but I can forego that. They're the main things.
Well, I tell you why, because I found a class 73 in my attic. Would you like it?
I would never say no, but I have to say it's a verge on the modern side for this railway. It's
Well,
true
it is,
that
yes, but you know, I mean, given your background, I think it fits rather well.
I'm not going to say no.
I'll email you.
It would go well with the 33, I must say.
Yes, I'll send you an email, Tim.
And of course, it would also multiple accurately with the SEP and the MLV, so that would be nice.
Well, I'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Martin. That's nice to know.
Very kind of you, Martin. And we'll have to
Is that
see
a
you do it
first?
sometime.
Is that a first, Tony, for a Zoom session, a transaction?
Yes, definitely. Offer of something for free.
We
Well,
didn't say,
I'm never going to do anything with it. I
didn't
have
say-
far too much stuff, as
didn't-
everybody does.
you didn't actually say it was free.
No, we will come to some arrangement that suits us both. But
That sounds all right to me.
basically, I'm offering it you for nothing.
That's absolutely lovely. Thank you. Offer accepted. I'll have to stick it in the next video in that case.
Okay, fair enough.
Smashing. What is the time period your railway is based on then, Tim?
Well, it's a bit flexible, but it's immediately after nationalisation. So I've got some pre-nationalisation liveries up to the early 60s. I worked on the Southern myself in the 60s. So most of the models I've made are models of things I worked on. And it's very much nostalgia and history brought to life. And I think a lot of us like to model things that we can remember from the past. Eric Bottomley, the artist, is from the northwest Bolton area, and his fantastic model railway is based on the industrial landscape of that area. And mine is based on my memories of the southern, really. Yes. Oh, there was a question about head code lights.
Yes.
They're a sandwich. So the sandwich is a piece of transparent material, such as you'd use for glazing, and then a piece of white, very thin white plastic card, and then the head code number, which is printed white on black, and then another piece of plastic card and an LED behind it. So when the LED is not lit, it looks like a white blank, which you'd get at the rear of a train. When the train's moving forward, the LED lights up and shines the light through the stencil, as it were, of the number. So the two numbers on this branch are 77 for the express trains and 28 for the stoppers. So all the EMUs have either got 77 or 28 on them, and they depends on what they're going to work. The Brighton service 20.
They certainly look about right, don't they?
And those numbers, of course, are real numbers taken from the sequence, because if you look at the period south central head codes, there are gaps in the series at 28 and 77. 76, I think, was London Bridge to Brighton, and one was to Eastbourne, so 77 fits in quite nicely, and the same with 28 on the stopping service.
Changing the subject of this slightly, you mentioned your preferred material for making buildings is MDF. Where do you source your thin MDF?
I struggled for quite a while. I had some 3mm, which I bought from a DIY shop, but that dried up quite quickly. And I then simply searched the internet and found a firm somewhere in Wales which will supply MDF through the post. So I bought a series of 2 foot by 1 foot sheets, and they arrive the next day, as they do these days. 2mm MDF.
2mm MDF, somewhere in Wales.
Somewhere in Wales, but there are no doubt other suppliers. And I got 6 sheets, and I've only used about 2 of them up to now, so I've got plenty more buildings I can make from those.
So what do you face them with? Do you face them, do you paint them, or do you face them with plastic card?
Mostly plastic card. Some of them are painted.
Mm-hmm.
So the building with the let me just find it. Bear with me again.
What do you use to adhere the plastic card to the MDF?
Oh, I'm ever so simple. I use Yoo-hoo. I found it extremely effective. I've made several mistakes as I've gone along, and in the source of that, I found that Yoo-hoo is extremely rigid.
Mm-hmm.
There's the buildings. The building on the left is painted top half, and plasticard brick effect bottom half.
Mm-hmm.
The pub front is a photograph, and you can see the MDF cut out there in that top section of the picture. The various component parts, and then simply glued together with Yoo-hoo.
It certainly looks solid enough.
I discovered it worked really well because I glued one of the shoe beams onto the electric loco in slightly the wrong position. And I didn't notice it at first, but if you look at the video very closely, you can see the loco jump as the shoe beam rides up over the top of the conductor rail. And it was so solidly fitted that it didn't distort at all. I had to change the shoe beam in the end. So it proved the glue was really, really effective. Even sticks buffers on, I found.
Is there anybody got any other questions at all? If you do want to ask a question, then by all means, stick it onto the chat and I'll try and pass it on. There's James Gibbons says he's got a photo of a black motor class 700 at Tunbridge on a freight from Red Bull.
Oh, that's not far out. That's slightly, yes, that's interesting because I know they worked on the Southwestern.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sadly,
I
I have
can
no
actually,
idea what a black 700 is.
it's a 700 class. It's a black motor. I think, I'm not sure who designed them.
They were Drummonds.
Say that again?
They were Drummond, Dougal Drummond.
Dougal, that was it, yes.
Yeah.
I can see the chat now, Tony. What mated you to do the Home How's your work? We've done that one, haven't we?
Yeah, well, I think we've done all the questions that were addressed to us earlier.
Yeah.
Can I just say, locos moving about, they were all basically the same, unlike modern traction where you need about God knows how many weeks conversion courses. Steam engine was a steam engine. You know, they referred to a regulator.
Yes, if you could.
Injectors. Once you knew where everything was, you just got on and drove them. They were all the same.
Yes, James, if you could drive one, you could drive them all.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I met a driver at a show, a Gay Joe show. Brave Shirley was running a live steam Q1, and this driver said I used to drive those, and he turned out to be from Red Hill Shed.
Oh right.
And he said when I was a fireman, I was with the driver and he'd let me drive, but he said to me, if you pass a signal, he said, I'll make sure that no driver in this shed ever lets you drive an engine again. So I said to him, well, you didn't pass any signals. And he said, no, I didn't then. But he said, this driver who let me drive, he said he had a bad back, so I had to fire it as well as drive it.
Oh yeah, when drivers let you have a go, they do the injectors for you, and that's about it as far as it went.
Are you a driver yourself?
Right, but what they used to say was that guys like him would say that when they passed for driving, you know, seniority, and most of them, any decent fireman would know how to drive. You didn't go to driving conversion to turn out to drive.
Through their practice they've had over the years.
Yeah.
On Peacehaven, sorry.
I've got another question for you, Tim.
Yes, go on.
Is it analog control or DCC control?
It's analog.
What analog system do you use?
I had a leftover Hammond Morgan Powermaster from my youth, and that forms the main controller for the Peacehaven terminus. and all the rest are handheld controllers which plug in. And I bought them mostly at guild shows, bring and buy, etc. And there are 5 of them altogether, so we can plug in. I've got lots and lots of miniature plugs and sockets. So the signals on the outdoor section can be stored indoors, and they've got plug and socket 4-pin, and then the control panels at Telscombe and Peacehaven are on a 24-way plug and socket. Where are we? Go back to the sharing again. There's the signals when they're not in use.
So they just simply plug in when you...
They slot into a slot in the side of the track, and then they plug in, yes. And the same type of plug and socket is used for the controllers. They can be plugged in at various points on the layout. I noticed Keith Gowan's on this call. He's driven some trains at Peacehaven.
Yes, I had 2 sessions training, I seem to recall. The hardest job I found was trying to drive it as a authentic railway as against a model railway. I think I got told off once or twice because I did something against the timetable in the fiddle yard.
Oh dear, as long as you didn't pass any signals, Keith.
Yeah, just a quick one, Tim. You did recommend to me Yoo-hoo power glue.
Yes.
The power being a very effective glue that sticks within minutes and is solid within a few hours.
Yeah, it
The
works
only
well.
problem I had, Tim, is where to find it in the locality.
Yeah, okay, yes. Well, I've used ordinary and power, and they both seem to work okay. This is the down home signal at Peacehaven, which is a bit complicated, partly because it's got 3 solenoids attached to it. And the other thing is it's hinged because it has to fold away when it's when the boards are folded up. So it's got 2 top arms and then a shunting signal for going into the yard. And then it's got a route indicator, which is LEDs, a pair of LEDs wired back to back. So they're switched by the point motor to the appropriate platform 1 or 2. And that's it in use.
Do you have any trouble with keeping the rails clean in winter?
If the line's out of use for several weeks, I clean them. And I use a Pico track rubber for that. And it takes about 15 minutes to do the whole line. And if I then use the line within a couple of weeks, I don't bother to clean it, and it seems to work pretty well. If we're having a running day, I'll clean it before the running day. But other than that, doesn't seem to need cleaning all that often.
You like that track thing, don't you?
The indoor lines, hardly ever. Again, the dust falls off them.
Chris has asked, in your video, you've had some very effective block instruments. They look nice. Are they interlocked with the section signals?
Yes, they are. Yes, the signalman has to have a line clear on the block instrument before the section signal will clear, yeah. And that applies to all the section signals, Telscombe and Peacehaven and Rodmell. There's only one signal at Rodmell, it is the section signal. The other thing about the interlocking is the bridge is removable, the girder bridge. And if it's not in position, the section signals won't clear. So provided the drivers obey the signals, they're not going to run into a gap.
Tim, I just realised something. I'm in mid PC change, which is a nightmare.
I feel sorry for you.
Well, push comes to shove, bits of the mechanical Microsoft world have stopped working. But could you send me an email? Presumably you still have my email address.
I'll check.
If you have, could you send me an email and then I'll just be able to pick it up from that? Because I realise I've eradicated all my old emails.
I'll have a look.
All right, just whenever it's convenient.
Martin, what's your guild number?
What's my what number?
Your guild membership number, Martin.
23055.
23055.
Yeah.
Right. I've access to the membership database. If you don't mind, I will send Tim your email address. Is that all right?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Or send me Tim's email address.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
either way.
I'll sort it.
Or both ways. And then we'll get it sorted one way or other. Thanks very much.
Okay, you're welcome. It might not be today.
No, I think today's nearly finished.
Are you still with us, Tim?
I'm still here, yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's quite a few having to sign off, and they're all saying that it's been an interesting presentation and thanking you for your interesting information. And there was somebody asked, do you get any problem with high summer temperatures and distortions?
That's an interesting question. I'll say no, but of course the outdoor track, which would be more subject to the temperature, is glued to the top surface, but it's only glued at the end of each length. So if it gets really hot, it does distort a little bit. You can see it on the film actually. There's a slightly wavy on the film, but I've got gaps in the running rails anyway, so they take up most of it. I've discovered when watching other people's railways, if you want to get a really good clickety-click noise of trains going over the joints, it's no good having a gap of less than about 8 millimeters. So you do need quite big gaps to make the clickety-click work, and they provide your expansion as well. So bear in mind all this. You know, I didn't have much knowledge a few years ago, and the Guild information in the Gazette in particular has been hugely beneficial in providing techniques and so on. The coupler operator for the 3-link couplings I made from a design suggested in the Guild, and other things I just thought about as I went along. I did think about DCC, chose not in the end because it seemed to create issues with contact and so on. So I found the DC being simpler. It's more straightforward. It works every time, and there's no question of having to program things. You just go make it all work. The train control is by sections, isolating sections. So I think there's about 14 sections in the Peacehaven terminus with row switches which the drivers can use. And yes, as you can see, we operate it with the block signalling and so on. The block instruments are homemade. I did consider using real ones. There are a few problems with that. One is very expensive. The second is they're rather large. And so I finished up making replicas, really. They're quite small. They've got lights rather than needles. And as I say, the arrangement is such that are interlocked so that unless the line clear indication is showing, the section signals are not released.
So how does that work? Is it a system that you've developed, or is it a system that somebody else has?
No, it's I developed it, but wasn't very difficult. When the block instrument is turned to line clear, it lights a lamp in both instruments, the sending and receiving instruments, and in the same circuit there's a relay. So provided the instrument's at line clear, it picks the relay up and that releases the section signal. The train online indication works the same way, but it doesn't need a relay. It just has the 2 lamps in series. It's a bit hungry in wires. I bought a lot of multi-core cable, 12-core and 24-core cable to join the various bits of railway together. And I put the outdoor cabling into conduit underneath the track formation. There's 2 conduits. One carries the power supply to the track, and the other conduit carries the signalling circuits.
I noticed that you communicate between the signalling positions using bell codes. Are they
Yes.
British Rail standard bell codes you're using?
Yes, although one of the visiting signalmen has recently suggested I should be using Southern Region bell codes, so we might have to adapt the practice before too long. Southern codes, the Southern being a bit different, the codes are a bit different, but the principle's the same. You ask for a line clear. If the line's clear, you're given the road. When the train goes, you give entering section, and then when it gets to the end of the line, you give train out of section, and then you can offer another train. They're actually double line instruments, but they're used on a single line, so they're so arranged that once a line clear has been given in, say, the up direction, then it's impossible to get a line clear in the down direction. So they serve the purpose, even though it's a single line.
I see. And obviously, anybody with any knowledge of that, but where did you get the knowledge for signalling, or is it a professional thing?
No, I've only had signalling as a hobby. Some of the volunteers who come to help run the railway are signalmen, and they are pretty knowledgeable. So they've started to train other people. So it's gradually going from person to person. And I've had a lifelong interest in signalling. So I think I was working signal boxes before I was driving, in actual fact.
Tim, can I come back on that? I certainly did enjoy my time operating, being a signalman and a driver on the train. And it does, after a while, you are really hooked on one of those two jobs
Yeah.
the rest of the day.
Well, the volunteers.
Yes, absolutely. And you're quite right. You do seem to have access to quite a few signalmen either working on heritage railways or in the locality.
Yeah. I mean, if there are enough people, you can operate the line with 4 drivers and 3 signalmen. So there's plenty of jobs for everybody. And if you've got fewer people, then it can be simplified. So the running days are probably the most enjoyable aspect of what's going on here now.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the food that your dear wife provides makes it most enjoyable.
Don't advertise too much, Keith. Everybody will want to come.
The railway management system that you use for your rolling stock how do you go about organising that?
Could you just repeat that? I missed the first part of the question.
Yeah, you know you have a railway managing system.
Yes.
Where you write down what trains are going where.
Right.
Where does that idea come from? Is that from real signalling system or what?
It comes from various places, really. To try and operate the railway, the aim is to operate it as it would have been operated in the real world using old-fashioned technology, 1900s lever frames and signals and so on. And the timetable, of course, is easily based on southern practice with a regular interval service of stopping trains to Brighton. They go every half an hour. And then the semi-fast to London go once an hour. The cross-country trains, Saturdays only service to Birkenhead, that's an occasional run. The freight works in between all that lot. And as for which freight wagons, they more or less get picked off the shelf at random at the start of the session, coupled in either groups of 2, 3 or 4, with automatic couplers between the rakes. And then sometimes we might put in the timetable of shunting movement at Telscombe. So that creates a bit of interest for the Telscombe signallers and drivers, because if they want to put wagons in the shed at Telscombe, they've got to bring the train in, uncouple, run round it, detach the brake van, put the wagons in the shed, put the brake van back on again. So it provides a bit of interest.
Mm-hmm.
The practice at Rodmell, I was about to say, any loco can work any train. So although you've got to stretch your imagination a bit, there's nothing wrong with an E4 tank going as far as Red Hill, but equally it can be the Coco Electric, or it can be the Bobo, or even the Terrier. It used to pull 4 coaches on the Hayling Island branch. So the locos are all interchangeable. So when the loco gets to Rodmell, it unhooks, is trapped then at the end of the road. The previous loco couples on the other end of the train, takes it away. The loco that's then released goes into the spur, waiting to work the next train. So the locos all step up from one train to the next, each one that comes in. So we're not too fussy what works what.
I see.
I got a little trick on the Coco Electric loco. The steam locos have all got drivers and firemen. The diesel shunter's got a driver. The electric loco, I discovered that if you put a driver in both ends, the cabs are such that they're rather dark and you can't actually see the drivers. But when the head code lights come on, the head code light has some backspill which lights the interior of the cab. So when the loco's coming towards you, you can see the driver because he's slightly illuminated. The one in the back cab you can't see because it's still dark. So that's a little trick which I discovered by mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes, by the way, plenty of mistakes. I decided to start my experience by building a couple of wagons. So I went through the Gazette adverts and picked a couple and ordered them, expecting to get kits, and they turned out to be ready to run. That shows you how ignorant I was. they came ready assembled, so I didn't have to build them. I had to start with something else.
There are a few people starting to leave, so it's perhaps getting towards time to wind up the session. And before we do, I'd like to be able to do a little PowerPoint presentation advertising the next evening with, which is on the 26th of August, and that will be with Ellis Clark. And that's all to do with designing from the very start to the selling whatever it is he's deciding to sell. And it's asking him questions about that. So if I can just take over for a short while, Tim, and then
Yes, you carry on.
That's
Yep.
if I can do this presentation, because I don't know whether I can share my screen. You just bear with me a moment. Share screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. Well, here it is. The booking starts tomorrow. So you can log on to the Gauge-O Guild website tomorrow and you can book your place on an evening with Ellis Clark to find out about Ready to Run from the first idea to the first sale. Bound to be an interesting evening. Jackie Nishaw is going to deal with that. And also don't forget that the Guild is holding another virtual show on the 6th of November. It'll be from 9:30 in the morning till 1700. And it is free for all members and non-members. We've got a whole host of different things to put in that, from loads of different layouts, demonstrations, that live on Zoom, and of course you'll be able to ask lots of different people different things. There'll be the usual modelling competition, and again, more questions and answers. Again, the virtual show is totally free. It will be recorded so that if you happen to live in a geographical area where it's impossible to see it live, then you'll be able to see it for the following month with all the recordings of the demonstrations and such like. And there are a number of people that have arrived tonight that are not Guild members and have had to pay for the privilege of coming and visiting this evening with. It has been noticed that some of those members or non-members have visited us several times. The members get it for free the evening with, so it may well be worth actually joining the Guild. It's only £28 for UK or £33 for out of the UK for foreign members, as I should say. Maybe that's a bad term. I should have said not in the UK members. But you can join online now, and it's only £28 or £33. And I'd like to say before you all go, thank you very much for coming and joining us, and don't forget to visit us again on the 26th of August. And now I notice that there is a problem with this slide because it says at 2000 GMT, but we haven't changed in the UK to GMT on the 26th of August, so it should read 2000 BST. Apologise for that. It's definitely 2000 BST. And so I'll hand you back down to Tim again, who will take over and take any questions.
I'm still here if anybody wants to ask anything or any comments, please. I'd love to have comments because
Yeah, please unmute yourself one at a time to come in, please.
You get spads.
yes, disciplinary action follows. It's usually inexperienced drivers failing to notice, I have to say.
Especially if the spad causes you to go over the open bridge.
Yes, that hasn't happened yet. But then the bridges are usually put in place in good time before the session starts.
Thank you for that one, Dr. Dave.
Just interrupting you there. When I had the session on operating Tim's Railway, we left a train from one end without a tail lamp. Well,
Oh,
because this is a sin in railway terms, and Tim implemented such regulations, I was completely confused, but it basically boiled down that an engine was sent with a tail lamp to the offending train, and various comments were made in the book, and regulations obeyed.
yes. Well, of course, our signalman friends would know that if that happens, you have to have the line examined to see if there's any training section. So we had to send the terrier to have a look.
I'm glad to see that everything's
We haven't mentioned
wonderful.
tail lamps yet, but they are quite an important bit of railway operation. The signalman will want the tail lamp to be present to know the train's complete. And it's caused a few interesting issues. The first is the tail lamps are attached by magnets. I tried all sorts of methods, blue tack and various things. It didn't work. But you can purchase very small 3mm diameter powerful magnets. I think they're called rare earth metals. And so there's a magnet on the back of the tail lamp and one on each vehicle that needs to carry one. So they're popped on and off at the ends of the journeys. I started off putting electric tail lamps on the EMUs, and that was fine when they only ran singly. But as soon as the EMUs start to multiple, the last thing you want is an electric tail lamp because it comes on in the middle of the train. So I'm gradually having to remove the electric tail lamps from the EMUs and substitute them with the magnets.
Chris has just mentioned that you said that your lifting section is interlocked with the block instruments. Is it also interlocked with the track power?
No. No, there's no interlocking with the track power. The track power is under the control of the drivers using section switches. So it's up to the drivers to observe and obey the signals. That's part of the realism.
How do you get the power across the bridge, Tim?
Okay. The conduit runs under the ground at that point. It has to feed the section beyond the bridge anyway. And there's a plug and socket for the bridge itself, and it's a 4-pin. They're standard. I've standardised on radio spares 4-pin plugs and sockets,
Right.
and 2 of the wires are the power supply, and the other 2 are the interlock.
Chris has also mentioned that about tail lamps. He usually drills a hole in the bottom of the tail lamp, sticks some blue tack in, and then uses it straight onto the lamp bracket. And
That's a neat idea.
the blue tack stops it revolving, and it usually stays there.
Yes, I did try the drilling hole business, and he's obviously observed they swing about and drop off. But that's a good idea, sticking blue tack in the hole. I like that.
Ken here. Where did you
Hello,
get
Ken.
the gate mechanism from?
Made it.
You made it, right?
Yeah, I made it with the geared motor. I went on the internet to buy a set of crude gears, which you saw in the picture, and then I had to put a cam on it and the micro switches to stop it at the end of the travel.
Right.
I did think about using servos, but I found I couldn't cope with the theory of the servos. I couldn't get my head around programming them, so I went for the old-fashioned electromechanical solution instead. In fact, I tend to reach for a relay rather than anything technical. I wanted to.
Okay.
I had to modify one of the indoor points because there was a slight curve in the track leading up to the point, and the backs of the flanges of the wheels were shorting out on the point blade. So I ended up having to isolate the point blade by cutting it, putting a separate feed in and switching it with a relay, but that worked quite well and it solved that problem completely.
If you join the blade to the running rail and cut the thing before you get to the frog, this solves that problem. I mean, I always do that.
It is an alternative, isn't it? Yes.
But when the blade is open,
But it doesn't
Right.
matter if it's cut. If it's,
Yes.
if it's separate from the frog.
yes, I had to do that. I had to cut it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do that
Standard
small
practice.
course. I mean, with every point.
Right, okay, that's interesting. I haven't had to do it except in one. I had to do it in one particular location because the flanges were touching, but that was all. That's interesting, that.
Oh,
And I guess if you build your own track, which I certainly haven't done, you could build that into it.
yes.
Yeah. It's standard practice.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Michael. That's useful to know. Never stop learning, and I'm really at the beginning of the learning curve.
Now tell me, do you bond the track outside
Yeah, every rail has got a dropper wire on it.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah, every in fact, in the entire layout, every rail has got a wire soldered to it, and then it goes onto a bus line. Yeah,
Mm.
and the outdoor feeds down the outdoor line a 2.5mm mains cable to get the cross section to make sure there's not too much volt drop.
Do you suffer a problem with voltage drop at the far end of the layout?
No, no, not at all. No, but as I say, it's 2.5mm cable, so it does pretty well, really.
What is the length of your run in total then?
It's 100 feet end to end.
Mm-hmm.
It's 16 foot in the garage, and then 140 feet up the gradient, and then round the corner, and the total end to end distance is 100 feet.
Just remind us what that gradient was.
1 in 100.
1 in 100. A bit like the Midland did when they did the Settle to Carlisle line. They had a
think
ruling
so.
gradient of 1 in 100.
And it's a good test because I stick my locos on a nice big rake of stuff and make sure they can get up it.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any further questions before the end of the session? Please speak now. Anybody? It looks like you've covered
I
just
just
about
had
everything.
one, Tony.
Yeah, come
Go
on
on,
in.
Bill.
Sorry,
Yes.
Yeah, I did put it in a message to you, but anyway, it's just to ask Tim, to thank Tim for a very informative presentation, and I particularly like his emphasis on operation. I just wanted to ask him if he knows when and where he might be exhibiting the layout.
in my garden by appointment.
Right.
Yeah, we have
Can you
running
pencil
sessions
me in
about
for can you pencil me in for September next year then, Tim?
2022. You mean?
Yes.
Yeah, if we're still running then. No, we're running about well, weather is a factor, of course. It can be run in the rain, but it's not very pleasant for the operators. So it's a bit pot luck with the weather, but mostly it's been dry. We did have one wet day and we had to abandon running halfway through the day, but it was okay. And of course, the one thing you can do, even when it's pouring with the rain, is do shunting in the garage. So you can get quite a lot of interesting operations going. If I put the wagons in random order and ask for all the brown ones to be put together, or all the grey ones to be put together, or all the vans or all the opens, that can provide hours of fun, especially with the gradient on the marshalling yard and the uncoupler at the top. Bit of skill needed for that, Keith.
Yes. That'll be a later test.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And the test for all the wagons is to make sure they do actually roll down the gradient. Some of them roll so freely they crash into the coal wagon stuck at the bottom. Yes.
So what are the makes of wagons you have generally then?
Oh, they're a real mixture. Some of the kits are well-known makes. You'll probably know them better than I do, but mostly they're second-hand, so they're what I get really. I think I bought the two wagons I first bought by mistake were ready to run, and I bought one ready to run since then. I don't bother a lot with weathering, I must say. I prefer the vehicles to look smart, and the buildings as well. Occasionally you buy a wagon or a loco that's got weathering on it, but that's all right. But I remember the railway when it was relatively clean, so I prefer that.
I used to have all mine squeaky clean, Tim, and I built a whole load of private owner wagons. I think there were about 20 or 24, something like that I built.
Yes.
And every one looked as though it was ex-works.
Yes.
And I put them all out on the track. And to be honest, it looked like a circus act.
Yes, I can
or a
understand
toy
that.
train, basically. And that's from that point onwards, I was convinced by somebody who'd been trying to persuade me to weather them for years.
Yes.
And I thought, yes, 24 wagons all squeaky clean like that. No, it wasn't like that, even in pre-nationalisation days. So I've weathered them ever since.
Well, I
only lightly, I must admit. But
yes, I don't think I've got
somebody at one exhibition said, "That's not dirty; it's filthy."
Well, that sounds realistic to me. I haven't got two wagons that are the same, so whenever you run a freight train, it looks a real muddle anyway. Someone's just asked about
that's how it should be.
Yeah. Someone's just asked about this, which is the next build.
Is the vehicle behind you part of the all new the new all steel 2 HAL?
Yes, it is. There it is. I don't know if you can see that on your screen.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it perfect.
It's a kit. I bought it second hand. It's Westdale kit.
Uh-huh.
I've got the motor bogie in it now. The motor bogie, like nearly all my motor bogies, is easy build. They're very economical and extremely reliable. So it's got an easy build motor bogie in it. It's got Wayo bogie at the other end. I haven't put the interior in this one yet, but I'm gradually putting the unit together.
Mhm.
As I say, I bought it second hand. There's the motor bogie. If I put it in there, you can see it. It's a worm drive to one axle and a chain to the other.
A Delrin chain to the other
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. And this will have pickups on both bogies of the motor car and one of the bogies of the trailer car as well. So it'll have 6 pairs of wheels with pickups on, and I find the more pickups the better, and they do run quite reliably. Occasionally I've had vehicles that don't run very reliably, and usually when I turn them upside down I find one of the pickups has fallen off. So it just proves that more pickups, it really is helpful if you're on DC. Some at low speed,
Sorry.
at low speed the voltage can be as low as 2 or 3 volts, so you need to have contact.
What sort of pickups do you use?
Mostly phosphor bronze fingers.
So wiper pickups.
Yeah, which I just got loads of phosphor bronze. I think it was from Squires, and use a little bit of printed circuit board glued to the underneath of the bogie, and then solder on the phosphor bronze and stick a wire on it.
So
they work quite well.
Do you have the phosphor bronze wiping on the back of the wheel or on the tread?
Always on the back. I had some on the tread and I found they didn't work. And I concluded it's because the tread picks up dirt, which then gets trapped under the finger. So I found they work better on the back of the wheel. So that's where I put them now. The E4 tank arrived with a tread pickup, and I had to change it in the end because it wasn't working very well.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
The Coco Loco is American style, so it picks up on one side on one bogie and on the other side on the other bogie. But I've still fitted a couple of plungers on it as well just in case, and that's extremely reliable. It's never hesitated yet.
It's called having braces and a belt.
Yeah, well, I think you want the things to work properly, and if you're having a railway which is mainly an operational railway, which this is, the appearance is not as important as that they work. It gets a bit frustrating if you have to keep stopping and pushing the things.
Well, I'd like to wish everybody well. Happy holiday season and all that. I think it's time we call the meeting to a close now.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming and posing some very interesting questions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you, Tim, for showing us an operating railway.
You're more than welcome.
And thank you very much. And don't forget, tomorrow, get into the Guild website and book your next session on the 26th of August with Ellis Clark.
Great stuff.
Thank you very much for all coming. I hope it's been very interesting. I found it very interesting. And thank you for all your very good questions.